Hey everyone, it's Brad Wood. Today I'm going to be showing you how to override config settings in CommandBox using environment variables. So config settings are the top level settings of the CLI. You can set all sorts of stuff in here. Specifically, you can override settings from modules, which would depend on what modules you have installed. You can set things like your proxy settings if you're behind a firewall. You can configure your endpoints, such as your ForgeBox API tokens, default server settings. There's even settings on how JSON is serialized, and a bunch of miscellaneous settings. And you can set those inside the shell using the config set command. But if you're using CommandBox in some sort of environment where you want to be able to configure something externally to the environment, you can do so with any config setting using environment variables. Those are actually covered here in the docs on the environment variable overrides page. The basic concept goes like this: set an environment variable named box underscore config underscore, and then the name of whatever setting it is you want to change. These are not case sensitive. You can make them all uppercase, all lowercase, some unholy combination thereof. It doesn't matter. CommandBox will find them and it will use them so long as they start with box underscore config underscore. So for example, if you wanted to force a dumb terminal to still output color, let's say you're running a CommandBox task runner inside of a Jenkins build, we could set this environment variable first, color and dumb terminal is true, and then that would be enabled. If you want to set a nested setting, then you'll just use underscores to drill down. So for instance, setting the API token would be an environment variable called box underscore config underscore endpoints underscore forgebox underscore API token equals, and then your token. And these are going to be nested items inside of a struct automatically. A quick example of what that might look like here is a pared down Docker file from a client project. This client project uses Docker images based on Foundeo's Minibox to run task runners. And here you can see I set an environment variable called box config task caching equals true. And this activates a particular setting in CommandBox, which caches the task runner CFCs. For what it's worth, yes, you could accomplish the same thing with the run command. So if I actually ran a box config set and I set this equal to true, that would essentially be the same difference. The main difference is that this command here is going to take, I don't know, 5 to 10 seconds to run on my Docker build because it's actually instantiating box. This command here is instant because it's just setting the environment variable. And specifically, you could set this environment variable even outside of the Docker container, anywhere you want it. As long as that environment variable exists when CommandBox is run, it'll pick it up and use it. To show you a couple quick examples, here in my local CommandBox installation, if I were to look at my verbose errors setting, for example, it's currently set to false, so I'm not showing verbose errors. So if I exit out of CommandBox just to my normal Windows command prompt, I can set environment variable called box underscore config underscore verbose errors, and I can set this environment variable to true. And now, if I start up CommandBox again, we can output that variable, the config setting rather, and we can see that the environment variable has overridden the effective runtime value of it. There we go. Config show verbose errors. Now they're true. And what's kind of cool is if you look in the JSON file that's inside of the CommandBox home, the JSON file will still show false, which is the actual setting. So this environment variable override is truly just only in memory. As soon as that environment variable is cleared, CommandBox will go back to its previous settings, so it doesn't store those. And one final kind of cool example is just to show doing it completely outside of a Docker container. You could do this with a Docker Compose file, anything you want. If I was to run a Foundeo Minibox image and we were just to say, show us all the config settings that are inside of the CommandBox instance running inside of Minibox, give this half a second to spool up, and we'll see that Pete Freitag has a handful of kind of default settings he's put in here. So he actually has verbose errors turned on, and he has a couple server defaults. So just show what this could look like as well from a Docker standpoint. If I was to say, all right, I want to add an environment variable, and again, it would be box underscore config underscore, and let's say I want to override verbose errors to be false in this case. I can just pass that as an environment variable completely outside of the Docker container. And now when we spin up this Docker container with that environment variable in place, and we dump out all the config settings, we'll see that we've overridden verbose errors to be false. So there you go. So this applies to anything that can be set as a config setting. And remember, if you want to go nested down, actually, I'll just show you here. If I wanted to nest down and I wanted to override one of those server settings, I hate to confuse this with actual server.json overrides, but just since we had those examples on the screen, oops, I deleted too much. So box config, still a config setting that I'm overriding, and then server underscore defaults underscore open browser, and I'll turn that back to true. So again, normally you would have used like config set server.defaults.open browser. When using an environment variable, at least specifically in a Linux environment, you can only use underscores in environment variables because Linux is super stodgy about that. So wherever these underscores are, those get replaced with periods again. And you can see we drilled down and set this specific setting, nested down 3 levels deep, and turned it back to true. So you can use this in any environment CommandBox is running. Doesn't matter whether it's in Docker. Docker is probably just a really good likely candidate for this feature to be used. But as long as these environment variables exist, when CommandBox boots up, it'll find them. It'll override in memory what the config settings are, and that just gives you greater control over how you deploy and how you use CommandBox. Okay, that's it for this one. Have a good one.